Sorry, everyone. This is part two. I'll just keep it quick. The scholarly class is really significant in the religion of Islam because they play this role of defining and interpreting Sharia law that other members of the community might rely on. And, just kind of note that even in our contemporary times, Sharia law is really important to Muslims. But there are many schools of thought and differences between interpretations. So this is a place where we might see some variability amongst Muslims. There's very conservative interpretations of Sharia. There are much more liberal interpretations of Sharia. So this is something, and this is a role that scholars play, and there are a variety of different texts that people might consider, okay? Just a few things. Also, there is a, sorry, like, woo, the Islamic Empire historically is going to transition a lot after the death of Muhammad. So we see the beginnings of the rise of a political and religious authority in the role of Muhammad as he has followers, as he begins to introduce the words that become, known as the Quran, these revelations from Allah. There's followers in Mecca, then followers in Medina, and then ultimately more followers in Mecca. So the size of the religion and the followers expands. After the death of Muhammad, there becomes a very large question, who will lead the community, as a political and religious authority. There is no more that there will be a prophet. Muhammad was seen as a prophet, but the final prophet. So there's discussion about who will be the successor. And there's not really a clear, definitive answer in terms of who will be the successor. And this kind of creates some differences of opinions too, and some of our modern day differences between the sects of Islam, say, for example, Sunni or Shia or Muslims. Some of this, relates to this question of who should succeed the political and religious rule. But in any case, Abu Bakr, who is the first of four caliphs, it will be chosen as the caliph, and he is mostly a political leader, but also exists to lead the group of Muslims. So to some degree, religion and political roles become very intertwined. But Abu Bakr is not a prophet, not in the same capacity as seen. So there are not revelations that Abu Bakr will share with the community, for example. He is Muhammad's father-in-law, so he's well known in the community, was somebody who was kind of within the inner circle with Muhammad, so he becomes somebody who becomes the first caliph. There are a series of other caliphs, so I'm just going to use this slide and then I'll go back to the questions that you have. The first four caliphs are sometimes referred to as the rashidun caliphate. The first four caliphs serve for different amounts of time. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. Each one of these caliphs is selected by people within the community. In the case of Ali, for example, there are groups of people that would like to see Ali as the imam even earlier, as the caliph even earlier than he is selected, because he is seen to be blood relative to Muhammad. That becomes significant kind of qualifier to some Muslims. So this kind of forms a space where there's a little bit of a debate. For our purposes, we're interested in the way in which the Rashidun Caliphate expands, and there'll be some sources that you'll look at for that. We also will be looking at the rift that exists between people who become Sunni or Shia Muslim, and part of this is about the question of who should be the successor to Muhammad, or later successors who should lead the community of believers. In 661, this first four caliphate, the Rashidun caliphs, are going to end, and we see the rise of a dynastic family known as the Umayyads, who will rule the Islamic Empire from 661 to 750. Under the Rashidun Caliphate, we see very, very large expansion of the Islamic Empire. So we can ask why and how did that happen? Under the Umayyads, different political rule but also Islamic Empire, we can also ask how much did they expand the empire even more so, and what type of government system do they incorporate? Okay, so in order to answer these questions, we have 4 questions. You will see listed on Schoology 4 sources. You do not need to find any additional sources. The 4 sources include a few different sources from textbook or secondary sources. The 4 questions are: what made possible the spread of the Islamic Empire beyond the Arabian Peninsula? So whether we're talking about the Rashidun Caliphate or the Umayyads, what are the reasons why the Islamic Empire was able to expand so much? They expanded to Byzantine, they expanded to the former Sassanid Empire. What makes this possible? Where in the map, so if you actually look at the map in the McKay source, what areas of the world do we see the Rashidun Caliphate and the Umayyads actually expand to? The third question is: what led to the Sunni and Shia split, and what was it largely about? So there's 2 sources to help you with that. You might also see that in the textbook McKay source. The very last question is: what forms of governments were established to rule? So what did it look like when the Islamic Empire was under the caliphs? What did it look like when the Umayyads came into power? How did they change things? And then we'll, look at the time period beyond 750. The sources that you should see on Schoology include the McKay text. I would read that first. It's called The Rise of the Umayyads, and it gives us a sense of them and what was existing before and how they came into power, what types of structure they created for a government. The second source is written by an historian by the name of Peter Frankopan. He wrote a book that argues that largely the area of the world of what we would describe at this time period as like Byzantine, Sassanid, so groups of people who might be Christians, might be Persians or Zoroastrians, maybe also Islam as it comes to be. This area of the world is really significant, and he looks at the history of the world essentially from the perspective of peoples along the Silk Roads. And he makes a case about the role of the Umayyads. And this excerpt is from his book, The Silk Roads, A New History of the World. And then there's 2 sources that are like PDF files or Word docs from the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and one is about Sunni Islam, the other is about Shia Islam. So just check those out. They're kind of primers or something like that. Those 4 sources, if you read them, check them out. You should use those sources to answer the 4 questions, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Okay, be well, everyone. I'll see you in class.